Number 10. Sandy Hall grew up in Tacoma, Washington, where she spent her days playing with her older brother and his best friend, Ted Bundy. Hall remembers Bundy had a cruel streak from a very young age. In a Netflix documentary, Conversations with a Killer, Ted Bundy tape, she recalled he just didn't fit in. He had a horrible speech impediment, so he was teased a lot. She then described how young Bundy would build tiger traps in the woodland area that surrounded the neighborhood. She added, he had a temper. He liked to scare people. One little girl went over the top of one of Ted's tiger traps and got a whole side of her leg slit open with the sharpened point of the stick that she landed on. That was just the start of a long history of violence Bundy would inflict on females throughout his life. Number 9. Ann Rule. Arthur Ann Rule was a former colleague of Ted Bundy. They both worked shifts together as telephone operators for a suicide helpline. In Rule's best-selling book, The Stranger Beside Me, she revealed it was his good looks that allowed his traits as a true psychopath to go under the radar. I liked him immediately. It would have been hard not to, she described her book. As far as his appeal to women, I can remember thinking that if I were younger and single, or if my daughters were older, this would be almost the perfect man. Years later, when Bundy stood trial in front of his horrible crimes, younger women would surge towards the public gallery to get a closer look at the serial killer, even passing love notes to his defense team. It was the attractiveness and charm that aided Bundy in his ability to lead his victims like lambs to the slaughterhouse once he had gained their trust. Number 8. Carol Durant. In 1974, Ted Bundy had begun to impersonate a police officer so that he could lure away his victims. Teenager Carol from Utah will never forget the day she crossed paths with Bundy at the shopping mall. She recalled how Bundy approached her and she said her car had been broken into. He held out his police badge and recommended she go down to the station with him and report the crime, which she agreed to do. In the documentary series Conversations with a Killer, Ted Bundy tapes, Durant recalled he headed down a side street. Then he suddenly pulled over onto his side of the curb by the elementary school. And that's when I started freaking out and he grabbed my arm and got one handcuff on my wrist. I had never been so frightened in my entire life. I thought, my God, my parents will never get to know what happened to me. Unlike other unfortunate victims, Durant was able to fight Bundy off and escape with her life. She was one of the key witnesses of bringing down the notorious serial killer. Number 7. Rhonda Stampley. On October 2nd, 1974, Ted Bundy murdered 16-year-old Nandy Wilcox in Utah, and a week later he had the urge to kill again. Teenager Rhonda Stampley was walking home when Bundy pulled over in his Volkswagen Beetle and she accepted a ride from him. And then he turned a way that she didn't seem like the normal route to go. Stampley remembers he continued to drive one canyon and then into another, never stopping. And that's when she started to feel uncomfortable. He turned in his seat so he would almost facing me and leaned in really close. I thought he was going to kiss me, but instead he said, "You know what? I'm going to kill you." And he put his hands in my throat and started squeezing and shaking me. Stanley slipped in and out of consciousness during the attack. When she could see Bundy 6 meters away from the car gathering his killing tools, she ran away for her life. Stampley tripped and fell into a river that swept her away, an accident that helped her save her life. Number 6. Debbie Harry. Blondie front woman Debbie Harry claimed that she had a close encounter with Ted Bundy in New York. The one way or another singer said, "It was in the early 70s when I was trying to get across town at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. This little car kept coming around and offered me a ride. I got in the car and the windows were rolled up except for a tiny crack. She continued. I looked down and there were no door handles inside the car. Was strapped. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I wiggled my arm out of the window and put the door handle from the outside. I don't know how I did it, but I got out. He tried to stop me by spinning the car, but it sort of helped me flying out myself. Afterwards, I saw him on the news, Ted Bundy. Harry's description of the car matches Bundy's infamous Volkswagen Beetle, which had no interior door handles and seats removed specially to hide his slain victims from view. Number 5. Marilyn Chino. Marilyn Chino was best friends with Elizabeth Cloifer, who eventually went on a date with Ted Bundy. However, Chino had a bad feeling about her friend's boyfriend from the very beginning. In 1969, while hanging out at the Sandpiper Lounge in Seattle, Washington, she spotted Bundy staring at Cloifer. She recalled, I've never forgotten this. I walked in and across from the room, I saw Ted for the very first time. I will never forget the look he had on his face. It wasn't evil, but he was staring, nursing a beer. During Elizabeth's relationship with Bundy, she called Chino and told her that she had found some suspicious items, including women's underwear and plasters of Paris. Chino said that when she asked her friend if she confronted him over the items, Elizabeth replied that Bundy had threatened, if you ever tell anyone about this, I'll break your effing head. Later, when Elizabeth found further evidence, Chino managed to convince her to call the police. Number 4. Elizabeth Cloifer. Elizabeth was in a 6-year relationship with Ted Bundy. In 1981, Elizabeth wrote her book, The Phantom Prince, My Life with Ted Bundy, would be getting along fine, then a door was slammed and I would be get out in the cold until Ted Bundy was ready to let me back in. I spent hours trying to figure out what I had done or said that was wrong. And then suddenly he would be warm, loving again, and I would feel needed and cared for. In 1974, Elizabeth reported Bundy's suspicious behavior to the police. During a recorded interview, she revealed Ted Bundy went out a lot in the middle of the night, and I don't know where he went. Then he napped during the day, and I found things that I couldn't understand. She also uncovered his kill kit, a bag containing ropes, garbage bags, a ski mask, handcuffs, an ice pick, and a lung wrench. Bundy claimed all these items were for his own protection, but they were later used as evidence against him in court. Number 3. John Henry. Ted Bundy's former defense attorney, John Henry, revealed that he knew that the killer was born evil when they first met in 1975. Henry said, Ted was the only person in my 40 years of being a lawyer that I would say that he was absolutely born evil. Adding, I got the feeling right away when I first met him. He was a manipulative and he was dishonest. He seemed very believable, but in my initiative I said, no, he's not, telling the truth about a lot of things. Henry struggled emotionally with defending the case, as his girlfriend was murdered in California a few years earlier during the time at law school. The murder was never solved. He said, the comment, the one I still get chills about, is when Ted Bundy told me, the reason you've been my lawyer for so long is because we're so much alike. What bothered me is that he would think that we were alike, that we were friends. I've never considered myself a friend of his. Number 2. Robert Keppel. In 1984, 5 years before Bundy's scheduled execution, Detective Robert was working full-time trying to build a criminal profile for a Green River killer when Ted Bundy got in touch offering his service. Keppel spent hours interviewing Bundy about the motives of serial killers and how they operate. This eventually led to the arrest of Green River Killer, who was identified as Gary Ridgway. Aside from the criminal profiling, Bundy's other methods of catching serial killers were less orthodox. He suggests that we have a six slasher film festival and set up a video surveillance, have to where they have to park in the theater when they put cameras all on the cars and people. We wouldn't do that, but he said we will probably get the video of all the future serial killers. Number 1, Bill Hagmaier. 48 hours before Ted Bundy's execution, the killer was the FBI Special Agent Bill, as the pair spent more than 200 hours together, allowing Hagmaier to gain insights on the mind of a serial killer. A member of the FBI Behavioral Science Unit, Hagmaier is an expert in the case of Bundy. Hagmaier recalled being disturbed by Bundy's familiarity. He explained during the last days, Ted Bundy called me his best friend. I don't know how I feel about that. Here we have a guy giving you a warm handshake and you're thinking this is the same hand that held a hacksaw while cutting off a young girl's head. Hagmaier added, he told me something that I will never repeat, out of respect to the victims of the families. Let's just say that he did some things to the body that were just horribly as they could possibly be. Bundy died in the electric chair on January 24, 1989 at Florida State Prison. He was 42 years old. If you guys like these type of commentaries, or if you guys want me to do just pure written ones, let me know in the comment box down below. Thank you for everything. Like, comment, and subscribe, and share the video. Thank you very much.